Right. So in our current version of the game, when we run it, enemies are kind of dumb. They just move in whatever direction they're going, and if we have gravity applied to them. So if they hit the edge of the platform, go off the edge of the platform, they just fall, and all they do is just keep moving back and forth until they hit something, and then they turn around. So in this video, what I would like to do is make enemies aware of the platforms. So if it's on a platform, it can turn around when it hits the edge and just go back and forth. All right. But before we do that, I want to do just a little bit of cleaning up of the enemy class, because I think this will make it a little bit easier. All right. So I'm going to get out of the way and let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So I'm going to jump into the enemy class here. And, periodically, what I like to do is I look for code repetition. And code repetition means that there's an opportunity to clean things up a little bit. Usually it means a function is a good idea. And so I've got this line of code here where this is when I hit a platform and it reverses my direction. Here's another line of code that reverses my direction. And if we go to the check world edges, I have the same lines of code there. And what I've realized is that I actually don't need to worry about this speed variable at all. If I want my player to turn around, all I need to do is reverse the sign of the velocity. And if the velocity is positive and I'm moving to the right, I just make it negative and my player will turn around. If my player is moving to the left, I make it positive and I'll turn around. And so I'm just going to make a real simple reverse function that just says self.vx, and I'll just say times equals -1. And so what this means is each time I have the math, right, I've got this equation with math in it, all I really have to do is go self.reverse. So we'll copy that here, and we'll paste it here. And this works no matter, this is a better way of doing it because this works no matter which direction the enemy happens to be moving. And let's see, we've got on the check world edges, and we've got 2 places to do it. I like this approach a lot better because if you think like this line of code, yes, it does make the enemy reverse, but I have to think about why it's doing it. Here, whoops. I just say self.reverse, right? The intent is obvious. Oh, if I hit the right edge of the screen, I turn around, and the logic is handled in the reverse function. So I think this is much more readable in terms of the intent of the code. All right, so let me run this and just confirm that it works. And they're hitting the block, and let's check on the other edge of the screen and make sure they're still reversing properly. Okay, so everything looks good. So now, another little thing I realized is that, wait a minute, this speed is really no longer necessary anymore. So I'm going to delete the speed variable out, and I'm just going to make I'm just going to set the initial velocity to whatever I want it to be. And so in this case, I'm just going to make it -2, and that doesn't change anything. All right, so here I've just made the code a little bit more readable, and I have this reverse function now, which is nice because when we hit a platform edge, we have to do the same thing. We have to turn around. And so now I get to just say self.reverse instead of trying to think of the math I have to do to the velocity of my enemy. All right, so let's go get set up to check platform edges now. So I'm going to make a function def check platform edges, and then down here we'll just add it to the update. Platform edges. And so now we just have to get this to work. All right, so what I'm going to do with the platform edges is I am going to make my enemy move. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to nudge it down and check to see if the enemy is colliding with any platforms. And then if it is, right, so let's say the enemy is right here, what I want to do is say, well, if it's moving to the left, I just want to check to see if any of the platforms stick out a little bit past the enemy. So if the enemy is here and it's moving to the left, but the left edge of one of the platforms is to the left of the enemy, then the enemy can keep moving. And if the enemy is moving to the right, I'm just going to look for if any platform has a right edge that's to the right of the enemy, then the enemy can keep moving. And otherwise, I'm going to have the enemy turn around. So the first thing we're going to do is just nudge the enemy down and get a list of hits. So I'm going to say self.rect.y plus equals 2. We'll just nudge down a couple pixels, and I'm just going to copy this line, which grabbed the hits, and then we're going to nudge it back up. Right? We don't actually want to see the nudge happen on the screen. We're just kind of going, well, if we were nudged down, would we be touching anything? And that's how we can tell if we're even on a platform. All right, so this is the list of the platforms that we're kind of resting on, right? But we don't want to actually draw that movement on the screen. So the next thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and assume that I'm supposed to turn around, and then I'm going to look for a reason not to. So I'm going to say must reverse equals true. And then I'm going to look for a reason to flip the value of this. So I've got my hits, and I'm just going to loop through them. So I'm going to loop through check every platform in the hits. Make sure you're doing platform singular, all right, because platforms S is our sprite group. And I'm going to check the edge of the platform based on the direction I'm moving. So first, let's think about if I'm moving to the left. So if the enemy is moving to the left, so that'll be if self.ex is less than 0, and the player is moving to the left. And what I'm looking for is if the left edge of any platform is less than the left edge, like further left than the left edge of the enemy, that means the enemy still has room to keep moving. So I'm just going to say platform.rect.left is less than or equal to self.rect.left. And this means, right, the enemy is moving to the left, and there's a platform that still sticks out further to the left than the enemy is, so the enemy doesn't have to reverse. So I'll just say must reverse is equal to false. And so then I'm going to check the other direction. So let's say the enemy is moving to the right. So if the velocity is greater than 0, whoops, I missed a and right there. If the velocity, if it's moving to the left and the left edge of the platform is less than the left edge of the enemy. Okay, so we'll go in here, and this time we are moving to the right. So what I'm looking for is if the platform.rect.right is greater than or equal to that the enemies, which is self.rect.right. This is another reason that the enemy doesn't have to turn around, right? It's moving to the right, but the platform still goes further to the right, so the enemy can keep moving. So we'll just flip must reverse to false. And after we've checked all the platforms, right? So what we're doing is we're assuming we're supposed to turn around, and we're checking all the platforms for a reason to not turn around. And so at the end of this, I can just say if must reverse, then we'll call our self.reverse function that we just made. And so if we never find a platform that is sticking out past the edge of the enemy in the direction the enemy is moving, then must reverse never gets flipped to false, and the enemy will turn around. But if we assume we're supposed to reverse, and we check all of the platforms, and if any of them are sticking out past the edge of the enemy in the direction the enemy's moving, then must reverse gets flipped to false, and we don't turn around. And I chose this strategy because sometimes, I was trying to figure out a way, like, how do I find out if I should reverse? And I thought that was kind of a difficult thing to do because if you're checking one platform at a time, sometimes it'll seem like you're overhanging one platform and you think you have to reverse, but it turns out there's another platform that means that makes it so you don't have to. And so sometimes when it's difficult to figure out if you are supposed to do something, but it might be easy to figure out the opposite. And that's a good programming strategy to have, right? Instead of trying, sometimes it's hard to figure out one thing, but it's easy to figure out the opposite, right? So that's what we did here. And I'm going to run this. And so now my enemy that started out on a platform is going back and forth, and it's staying, right? It's staying up there. So everything seems to be working pretty well. What I'd like to do in the next video is show how we can have enemies that have different behaviors. So maybe we want some enemies that are platform aware, but other enemies that do just go to the edge and then fall off and then keep going. And so we'll take care of that in the next video. Otherwise, thanks for watching. And if you have any questions about this video, let me know.